Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this, well, dark Thursday evening. There's more people coming in, but I'm conscious and respect the time, so we're going to get going. Please remember, per the instructions, Q&A is in the Q&A function. We'll get to those at the end because it's oftentimes we answer the questions as we go forward in the slides. And yes, it will be recorded. Yes, it will be shared, both the deck and of course the audio recording. The deck will come out first. The audio recording, we just have to make sure it's all good, and then we'll share that with you as well. So let's go. I acknowledge I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, on whose land I have the privilege to live, work, and play. I'm actually in my daughter's bedroom. If you're anything like our house, depending which day it is, may depend which bedroom I'm actually zooming from. Bit about me, I'm Andrea Sinclair. I'm the president of BC-CPAC, and I've been an advocate since before my twins were born back in 2004, which for me currently seems like a lifetime ago. I've held many positions on PACs. I've got a lot of experience on both PACs and nonprofit boards, and I am currently a member at large on my children's high school PAC. That's kind of where our session is going to go. And if it looks like it's long, it is. There's a lot of information coming your way today. Maybe some of it you know, maybe some of it you don't, but it's a lot. But hopefully we get done in just around an hour, and then we have more time for questions. Any questions that we don't get answered, once they're captured in the Q&A, we will answer them offline and make sure that everyone who was registered to attend, in fact, gets that Q&A. All right. Starting at the basics, parent advisory councils or PACs, the structure. It is through the PAC structure that, sorry, I'm just getting rid of this little thing in my way, that all public school parents and guardians are represented at the school level by their PAC, at the district level by their DPAC, and at the provincial level by BC-CPAC. This diagram is one of my favorites. It was, thank you again, Vancouver DPAC, for creating it, sharing it, and maintaining it. It gives you a good idea of who is who. What you'll see there on the left in the blue is the school level, then of course the school board or board of education level, followed by the provincial level in yellow, and then you'll see some entities and ministries on the right. So what you see where the big red arrow is, that in all cases, and you'll see it with the other partners in addition to us as stakeholders, we are in fact a stakeholder at each and every level. The entities on the right are those groups, be them rights holders or First Nations ministries and other groups that work quite closely with the K-12 sector. All right. I wanted to begin to make sure everybody had a good basis for understanding Indigenous rights. UNDRIP is the most comprehensive instrument. That's obviously done with the United Nations. Then, of course, everyone, I'm hoping, is familiar with the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation, which is an ongoing process, certainly in British Columbia and many other parts of the world. Where you see it green on your screen, those are all hyperlinked to the documents. If you've never had a look at them, please do. And the reason I'm telling you about those two is because they lead into the two that are specific to British Columbia. We have the BC Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, or BC-DRIP. That was passed in November of 2019. And it's the framework that is BC context, which builds on the UN Declaration and, of course, confirms as the framework for reconciliation. BC Tripartite Education Agreement, or often referred to as BCT, exactly the way it sounds, enables Indigenous peoples to have the right to establish and control their educational systems and institutions as affirmed in UNDRIP. So these are important things for everybody to know. Again, these are hyperlinked. If you've never had a look at them, please do. This I won't go into too much. Indigenous education is evolving in British Columbia, and we are leaders in that respect. BCT was 2018, as I mentioned. In October 21, just in the last few months, legislative changes were made to support First Nations jurisdiction over education, giving every First Nations with a jurisdiction agreement the right to certify and regulate teachers. It's not new, or sorry, it's not only new, but it's also groundbreaking. It supports First Nations in their ability to certify and regulate teachers in their own schools, which is fundamental to their exercise of jurisdiction. As of January 2022, there are 13 First Nations who've been conducting their own negotiations with the federal government and also working on jurisdiction agreements. That's separate in addition to LEAs, which you will hear often in your own districts, which are local education agreements with the First Nations connected to your district. If you remember the diagram that had the blue and the yellow and the green, and then the right-hand side was all in white. Some of the names mentioned there, I want to explain a little bit further to you because you should be aware of them. They are in the context of BC K-12 education, both public and certainly independent. First Nations Education Steering Committee, or FNESC as we refer to them, they are the policy and advocacy organization that represents and works on behalf of First Nations in BC. They have a mandate to support First Nations students and advance First Nations education in BC, and they are one of the stakeholders at the provincial table, which is where we as BCCPAC do sit. There's also the First Nations School Association, and they work and represent the First Nations controlled schools in BC, and all First Nations schools can apply for membership in FNSA. They work directly with their constituents, and they report to their members through their AGM process, similar to actually ours. They too are a stakeholder at the provincial table. First Nations Parents Clubs, some of you may have heard of these. They're a little bit similar to a PAC structure. They're just not quite as not formal, but they run a little bit differently. We have spoken at FNESC conferences and talked to parents who were participating both in parent clubs, but also in things in the public school where their children were attending. Any group of First Nations parents, caregivers, and guardians who are formally affiliated with a First Nation in BC can register with the First Nations Parents Club, and it's delivered jointly by both FNESC and FNSA. So there's something to keep in mind. And last but not least, Métis Nation BC represents 38 Métis chartered communities in BC. They are recognized to do so, and like the others, like ourselves, they are a stakeholder at the provincial table. All right. The School Act. Okay, so yes, you could read it before bed, and yes, it may put you to sleep, but if you've never had a look at it, please do. Again, the green is the hyperlink. It covers everything, and yes, could it be better? Could it have different language? Could it be more specific and less vague in some sections? Certainly it could, but it does clearly outline rights and responsibilities of parents and students, both individual and collective. Special needs fall under orders of the Ministry of Education, and PACs and DPACs are specifically mentioned in multiple sections in the School Act, and I'll touch on that as we go forward. Definition of parent. So parent is broadly used. Often you will see us say parent, guardian, caregiver. In all cases, if we don't, parent is meant to be that. We pull that definition that you see here in front of you is from the School Act. Also, it indicates what guardian means. You'll see in B under parent, it's a person who usually has the care and control of the student or child. So in the 2022 context, we know that that could be not just the parents, it could be a grandparent, it could be whoever is the legal guardian. So parent is meant to encapsulate all of that. Definition of a school, also in the School Act. Pretty clearly a body of students organized as a unit for educational purposes. That's the definition on the left. Things you need to know are on the right. While they are public places, they do have restricted access. They're not like a park. You can't just wander in whenever you feel like it. And remember, they are workplaces for staff. And when you think of the workplace analogy, can I just go and walk into your work office or your place of work? No, I likely probably cannot. Parents and visitors, volunteers do not have the right to enter a school or a classroom without permission. That sounds very rigid. Normally it runs a little more relaxed. You will have all probably been into your school and you've entered without issue. The staff certainly get to know you. And if you're a member of a PAC, there's a lot of interaction at the school, but technically without permission, no, you cannot go in. Administrators have the final say on anything that occurs, and all PAC purchases for a school, unless specified, do belong to the school or district once they are purchased, and the materials are then the property of the school or the district. School Act, again, you're like, why is she telling me this? This is so boring. This is the preamble. It's actually not in the School Act proper as legislation, but the preamble is really important. And the reason I point it out to you is that some of the information you will see surfaces when you are hearing or reading some of the information that comes from the Ministry of Education when they talk about the educated citizen, democratic society, and those kinds of things. It's important to know that it's coming from here. Parent rights and responsibilities. Yes, you have both, right? You don't just have rights, you also have responsibilities. You have the right to be informed. You have the right to belong to the Parent Advisory Council. And to extend further on that, every parent who has a child enrolled in the school is by definition, by default, a member of the PAC. What is slightly different is PACs also have what are referred to as PAC executives. Those are the people that the larger community of parents, the larger PAC, have actually voted in through an AGM and a formal process to behave and act on their behalf and do the heavy lifting or the business of the PAC. And there are defined roles and usually in their bylaws, and we'll touch on that as we go forward. You do have the right to consult with the teacher, principal, vice principal, or any director of instruction with respect to your child's educational program. You can provide volunteer services at or for a school. You can examine all the student records kept by the board pertaining to your child. You also can be held liable with or separately from their children for property of a school board that is destroyed, damaged, lost, or converted, and so forth. So be mindful, be aware of what your rights and responsibilities are. This is the mandate for the school system in BC. It hasn't changed. These are just the subheads. There's a longer document that's behind it. But again, if you've never had a glance at it, please do. You'll see in Part B there, I mentioned the educated citizen. You will see that come up in ministry documentation and presentations quite regularly. You will see sections on diversity, goals of education, and so forth. It's important to note, and it doesn't change very much. It's been that way for some years. Regulations and order in council. These are things that are related to the School Act. And so they don't happen all the time. Orders in council, it's a very specific thing. One thing to note, there's both orders in council and regulations, and then there's ministerial orders. So I'll just go back. You'll see some here. What's a good one? School calendar regulation. They are required. Schools are required in order to map out a calendar for the following year, put it out to the parent community, and get feedback and give advance notice thereof. That's a regulation. Ministerial orders are also related to the School Act. A most recent one would be the Framework for Enhanced Student Learning, which was an order that was put through in fall of 2019. Prior to that, I believe, I've lost track of time. I'm sure you have as well. I think it was spring of 2019 when the order for menstrual products in schools came about. That too is a ministerial order, and ministerial orders are not up for debate. These are, you must do these things. So you'll see in the list there, you have everything from graduation to student records and so forth. These are all found online. You can look at them at any time. All right. Remember how earlier I talked about how there was 3 different things, one at the school level, one at the district level, and of course we are at the provincial level. In all cases, you will see on the screen there in front of you, you're advising the school or the district or the province on any matter relating to public education. And generally, we're supporting parents. So whether they're parents in the school, parents as part of PACs, or parents as part of PACs and DPACs. And just a reminder to everybody, and I know that you all know this, but perhaps maybe you don't, the business of the PAC and the DPAC is unbiased. And it is definitely not a forum for the discussion of an individual school personnel, parent, or other individual members of the community. On the one hand, you might go, yeah, that's really obvious. But I have been in some meetings where people sometimes forget that and kind of go off in a tangent, and you really should not. And if you see somebody do it, just remind them it's not the place for that. All right, to the heart of things. Parent advisory councils, as I said, they're recognized in the School Act. They must have bylaws under which they operate. They are self-governing. They're responsible for all the funds, whether they raised them, received them, and then distributed them. So received, for example, would be gaming grant funds. They apply, receive, report on, and they're responsible for what they do with them and for any funds that they raise. Most importantly, right in the middle, they are the collective voice of parents and guardians of the school community, all parents, all students, and they're composed of, run, and managed by parents. And the bottom bullet, advise and participate in the activities of the DPAC, and I'll talk more about that, but we need people at the PAC level connecting with DPAC, DPAC connecting with PAC, and both PAC and DPAC connecting with BCC PAC. The more that we're connecting, the more that we are doing this, the stronger and more informed we are. Key purposes of a PAC: feedback, parent involvement, communication, and parent education. You're looking at it. I know some of you are, and you're going, well, I thought fundraising was. No, it's actually not. It's actually not even written anywhere. You can do it, and many, many do, but it's actually not the top purposes, the reason PACs were established. And yes, there is no legislation, there is nothing written anywhere, there is absolutely no requirement to fundraise. But yes, many do, if not most, and many feel obligated to do so. And it's one of those lovely historic things that kind of rolls forward. It got started at some point in time when it was felt necessary, and of course it does continue. But please know there's no legislation anywhere that says that's why that you should do it, which is why we're called parent advisory councils, not parent fundraising councils. DPACs are really just the district level of the parent advisory councils. Also in the School Act, they're the official stakeholder representative of parents and guardians. So when you've ever been to a board meeting or you understand how the board in your area works, you have all the other stakeholders that are representing their workers. You then have the DPAC, who also is a stakeholder at that table, not just attending meetings as an attendee, as you and I might, but certainly they're there to represent you, and they'd be doing meetings and having conversations behind the scenes, you know, connecting the same as PACs would with the administration at the school level. They can advise the Board of Education on any matter, as I talked about earlier, and just the same, yes, must have bylaws under which they operate, and yes, composed of and run and managed by parents. Their role is a little bit different because they're more the umbrella organization for the district PACs. They could do everything from help a PAC form in a school if there wasn't one or it was a new school, help people obtain information or communicate with district personnel because they would have those relationships, they would be meeting with them, helping anybody navigate the school system locally. If you haven't had to navigate it, some of it's not really intuitive, and it does help when you've got somebody helping you to do that. Support and encourage their PACs and parents in accessing the school system at all levels. Exchange of ideas. You'll know that many DPACs offer education once a month, or they might have meetings, the same as the PACs do, but on a much broader scale. There are elected DPAC representatives. They act as a liaison between the PAC and the DPAC by attending DPAC meetings, the same way you might be on a committee and you attend a committee meeting. Often, if not most of the time, they are noted in the bylaws. They are an elected position insofar as that goes. Again, they can bring issues forward, but they also can bring information back. Having that two-way communication is very important. There's 3 levels of representation. You have the DPAC exec. So if you recall a few minutes ago, I talked about how the PAC, everybody at the school is a member of the PAC, but you have a subset, a small subset of people that are elected by you. Those are your executive team, and they're doing all of that work. They're having meetings, taking minutes, organizing projects and activities on your behalf, which, you know, most cases would involve you. The same goes at a DPAC. They have elections, they have an AGM, and they are elected. PAC reps, or the DPAC rep, as I just referred to in the last slide. And then, of course, any parent or guardian has absolute freedom to contact the DPAC with an issue that needs district representation and can attend a DPAC meeting. PACs and DPACs are not required to register as a nonprofit or under the BC Societies Act. Now, there are a handful that are, and it is kind of like fundraising. Our past, somehow we bring it forward with us, and there are some that still do. Please know that it's not required. We, of course, as BC CPAC, are registered under the Societies Act as a nonprofit charity because we operate as an NPO. In the more formal sense, we operate as a business, whereas PACs and DPACs are not operating in the true sense of a business. They don't have a business license, they don't pay taxes and those sorts of things, whereas somebody like BC CPAC does indeed do all of those things. Constitution and bylaws. I have touched on it, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, they're so boring. Why is she talking about it? Because they're necessary. And they're necessary because they articulate how meetings are run, how you conduct your business, how you need to dissolve if that was ever to come to pass, and how elections and finances are dealt with. Whether you're a PAC or DPAC, if you don't have a bylaws, you need to resolve that. It's actually a disservice to your community of parents and guardians if you don't have bylaws that articulate how you operate. And if you haven't looked at yours in a little while, or a long time, it's probably time. Think about it, it's 2022. There might be a host of things that are no longer relevant in your bylaws, but they're still there until they are changed. Whoop. Sorry, folks. So a Constitution and Bylaws is a living document. And so by that, I mean, it is what it is until such a time as it's changed. So if your Constitution and Bylaws doesn't really reflect what you do, and many of its sections might be problematic to how you operate, it's what you have to follow until such a time as you then put a committee together, look to make the changes, put your changes out to your community, and then have them voted on at your next AGM. And they should be kept and easily accessed and available. It's not something that needs to be hidden. Purposes. Simple. Constitution says, why does your organization or group exist? The bylaws are how are your operating rules. And so what I mean by that is think 10,000 foot level and not 100 feet level. So for instance, your bylaws might articulate that you do have an AGM in the spring or the fall. It'll indicate that you have one once a year. It's not going to say that it's held on the 25th day of May. It's not going to get prescriptive in that way, and for really good reason. Why not? So it's way up here, but it does actually indicate your operating rules. If you want to come down the next level, and I would highly recommend that you do, that would be your processes and procedures. And in this day and age, it's very easy to document, put it somewhere on a shared drive, and allow people to understand what you're doing. And I'll touch on that again later because it's really helpful as people come and go from your PAC and your DPAC. Once the C&B is adopted, they take effect immediately and they remain in effect until they are changed. So even if your bylaws haven't been changed for 20 years, well, doesn't matter. They're the ones that are actually still in effect. Elections. No real difference to elections, only just a smaller scale. You have positions, you have duties, you have terms, and you have a process. At a PAC and a DPAC level, you have different titles, but essentially you have an executive. You can have things that are co-shared. Currently at my high school PAC, it's very common for the secretary to be 2 people, and even the treasurer. We have co-treasurers at our school. DPACs might have additional positions such as a district liaison or BCC PAC liaison. As I mentioned, it will state when your AGM is. And please know, if you didn't know, for gaming grants applications, you need 2 executives to sign. So the question is, how many people do I need to create a PAC? Pretty much 2 or 3. It will get you going. For gaming grants reporting, you need a treasurer plus 1. We can touch more on gaming grants, and if you need to know more, we have a resource page on the website. It's free money. If you haven't applied for it at your PAC, go and apply for it. They're happy to give it to you. Elections, as I said, they're in your bylaws. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Just make sure that you do have your AGM minutes and you do record the election results as a motion, and have a process in your bylaws for a vacancy. Life happens and life changes for all of us. Certainly the pandemic is a large example of that, but life happens on a run rate basis for most of us. And sometimes we may be there and then we may not be there. So how do you deal with a vacancy when you're at the PAC level or even the DPAC level? Financial accountability. Yes, you are responsible for the money. No, you just can't keep raising money until you decide what you might like to do with it. You need to be really clear with people on why are you asking for funds if you indeed are asking for funds? What's the goal? What's the target amount? What's the thing you're doing over what span of time? I was once speaking, this is pre-COVID when I could do that, speaking at the Richmond DPAC, and I had a lovely group of people from a PAC who's like, so excited, we have $40,000 in the bank and we're raising more. And I said, that's great. Is it, must be for something big, playground? Oh, no, we're just raising it. Well, you really shouldn't do that. You run into problems with your parent community because they don't know why it is you keep asking them for the money that they probably are still giving you. But more importantly, how long do you have it? And at what point do the people that gave it to you potentially age out? And so it isn't their kids benefiting from the funding that they have given you. Questions about fiscal year. Generally, most PACs will have it to match the school year. It kind of makes sense. And yes, you do have to have a budget and you do have to have signing officers. 2, at least. 4 is better. Robert's Rules of Order and meetings. So sometimes when we say Robert's Rules, everybody goes, oh, and it's scary. It's not scary. All right, so think of meetings. They need to be focused on the business at hand. Yes, they have motions and they have an agenda. That's good. But essentially, Robert's Rules just gives you a set of guidelines that ensures that there's fairness, participation, respect, and that everyone is heard. And if you can do those 4 things, then that is the essence of Robert's Rules. The book is about, 4 inches thick. I've not read it from cover to cover. I've read whole sections of it. But as long as you are doing those kind of meeting things and making decisions as a group and recording it, you're doing the essence of what essentially Robert's Rules is asking you to do. Meetings. Don't have a meeting for no reason. Heck, cancel it if you really don't need to have it. You're there to conduct a business. You remember how I said the PAC executive is elected by the greater PAC community in order to do the business or the heavy lifting, because there is business. You get the gaming grant. So you get the money received. How do you distribute the money? Who's applying for the gaming? Who's reporting on the gaming? What is the treasurer doing insofar as the bank statements? There's always some business to conduct in addition to anything else that you as a PAC might do, whether it's raising funds or doing good work at the school, whether it's hot lunches or it's outreach to families in need, whatever it might be. Consider time of day and location. You want more people to attend, not less. Timely notice of the meeting. You can't tell them on Monday that the meeting is on Tuesday. I don't know about you. Even in a COVID paradigm, I've got a pretty busy schedule, and I imagine you do as well. Even if it's not meetings, it's all the things that we have as parents and families. Make sure you have the agenda in advance and make sure you can accomplish it. The agenda can't be 4 hours of work if your meeting is only 2. Have standing items, things like a treasurer update or treasurer report. Yeah, should be a standing item. An update from your administration. Yeah, could be a standing item. Stay on task. Some things might need to be taken offline or pushed to the next meeting. Make sure you hear from everybody and be really clear on what your actions are in your minutes. Meeting guests. Sometimes this is a tricky one, and some of you will say, but it's so simple, so obvious, and it is. So school administrators and staff representatives should be invited and welcome to attend your PAC meeting as regular invited guests. Yes, they cannot vote, but they're a wealth of information at the table. And if the goal is that you are working together towards the same vision, which you should be, this kind of connectivity is really, really important. So yes, they will attend, whether you hold it in the evening or you hold it in the morning or the afternoon, they will absolutely attend, and you don't have anything to hide, and they are there with you. PAC executives should also engage regularly with their administration teams and request to present at staff meetings when it is needed or when it makes sense. The superintendent at the DPAC level or their designate or a trustee should be invited and welcome to attend your DPAC meetings. Yes, not only do they have information that maybe you don't have, but also they have a better understanding of what is actually occurring at your meetings, where you're discussing something that perhaps they don't have that depth of knowledge. Maybe they didn't know there was an issue, whatever that might be. DPAC and PAC bylaws provide direction on the level of participation of invited guests and what to do. Sorry, I should have had a glass of water. What to do if a staff member is also a parent at a school. Every parent, as I say, at a school is a member of the PAC by default. Communications with transparency. If some of you have heard me present, you will always hear me say, we are not running small countries. We are running PACs and DPACs and BCC PAC. And yes, as much work as we have and as complicated as they might be, there's nothing that we really shouldn't be transparent about. So Constitution, bylaws, policy manuals, agendas, minutes, records, reports, newsletters, blogs, website, whatever it is that you as a group of volunteer parents, which everyone is, whatever it is that you are communicating or how you're communicating, try to be as transparent as you can and certainly as timely as you can. So your school community needs to know what you're doing and why it matters and how you need them. Believe it or not, we're collectively not always good at letting people know that we need them. They will assume that you don't need them often if you don't ask them. And there's a huge need for PACs to communicate directly. And if everybody's aware, CAN-SPAM requires that even though I give my email to the school in those lovely papers in September, the school cannot give it to the PAC. The PAC must go and seek out my email and I opt in to receive information. So leverage the school newsletter, connect with your parents. As many of you may know, it's much easier to do at the elementary school where most of us are there at some point in the day, whereas high school, well, probably our children have told us, please don't be there at all. But it's really important that you tell your parent community what you're doing and why. Simple reason is they should know. And when you get to engagement and you get to participation and volunteerism, which we'll connect on in a few slides, that becomes really, really important. They need to know why it matters and how do you really need them. You don't just need them to write a check or, you know, buy Purdy's chocolates. You need them for much more than that. Messages. The message is the core argument you're trying to communicate. So describe what you do, why you're doing it, why your community should care. Then tell them again, and then tell them again. So it's an old stat, but it used to be that you needed 7 touches, 7 points of communication, repetitive points for something to sink in. And if you figure all of the messages we hear and receive throughout the day, our email, our phone, our smartwatches, our television, our children, we get a lot. How do you break through all of that noise? Sending it once, I don't know that they might read it. Tell them again. If you ever heard of WIFM, what's in it for me? figure out how to articulate why it should be important to them. They need to understand, and don't assume that they will know. Social media. Designate a spokesperson. It's usually in the chair, and yes, it should be in your bylaws. Stick to your facts, be respectful. And no, you don't need to comment on everything. Use it to inform and educate, not to rant. And not everything is appropriate for social media. There are many people in the world who believe that everything is appropriate for social media, but best practices and good protocol says actually no. Media, different. Designate a spokesperson. Now, the chair, if that's who's been designated, can actually designate down to someone else, but you have to start somewhere. Don't feel obligated to respond if you get asked a question by email or in person or however it might come to you. Again, stick to your facts. You don't need to comment on everything. And remember that not all media is good media or good attention. So if you actually have media or you have done it, then you will understand perhaps that sometimes it's sort of double-edged. And be mindful that you represent all parents when you are speaking. So DPACs and PACs can only communicate with parents once parents have provided their contact information or opted in to receive it. On the one hand, I can hear you out there saying, oh, so I have to give it over here and then over here. Yes, it's not us making those rules. We're following CAN-SPAM. And yes, there is no master provincial list of parent email data. That came to light early in the pandemic in 2020, where people thought that that's something that did exist, and somehow that is how all of us could communicate with everyone else. No, it doesn't exist. There is a direct need for PAC and DPAC to communicate with their PAC and parent community, and for that, parents need to provide their contact details to the PAC and the PAC to the DPAC. So if you're upset as an individual parent or guardian because you didn't receive something, I'll wager it might be that they don't have your current contact information, or perhaps they never had any contact information. So seek them out, give it to them to make sure that you are able to receive the information, and then you are in the loop and you do have the knowledge that they're sharing. And both PACs and DPACs share immense amount of knowledge with their communities. So why is an active, engaged PAC important? Well, I was going to hold back the answer because I figured by now you were all really smart and you'd figured it out. It's through those elected executives from parents in the school that PACs or PACs with the DPAC communicate with their parent community. They gather information, they discuss issues, and they adequately advise those that influence their school, or in the case of a DPAC, their district. There isn't anyone else that's speaking for parents, so you have got to be engaged in order to be representing your voices. And that's not meant to be negative comment about the other stakeholders at the table or the district or the administration. They come at it from a different lens. If they're representing their workers, as some of the unions do, their first and foremost mandate is indeed their workers. If they're representing it from a district or a school administration point of view, and you will know this yourselves in whatever career or job or work that you do, the lens is just a little bit different. So it's important that the different perspectives are all at the table and they're all represented. Engagement, what is it? Well, it's anything and everything. It's not as hard as sometimes we think. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be really small things. It could be complex things, but it's nurturing and it's repetitive. So think of it this way. Am I likely to run for a PAC executive if you approach me at the end of May for an event that's 3 weeks ahead and you and I have hardly ever spoken? Heck, you don't even have my email and I never read your newsletter. I'm not engaged. I'm not informed. I don't feel like I'm a part of it. I'm not really going to run. When I feel a part of it, then that's when I'm there when you need a volunteer. I'm there when we need more hands on deck to do whatever project, whatever initiative. So, it's the Scholastic Book Fair, it's a spring carnival, whatever it is, silent auction, don't know. That's when they're there. Does it take time and effort? You bet. Is it worth the payoff and much, much less stress? Yes, it is. It's anything you want it to be. PAC meetings, one-on-one, really easy to do in an elementary setting when the kids are all in the school, you're passing people in the hallway, connect with them, find out. People don't realize how much they have in their parent community. And by that, I mean, everybody's doing something. They're either working, they're owning a business, whatever it is they're choosing to do. You don't know until you get to know them. And those are the people that if you are looking to fundraise, those are connections that you would like to make. Or you're thinking about class reps. Well, if you know the people in the classroom, those are the people that might be able to then be on hand in each of those classrooms to secure those email addresses that you need in order to communicate. And help parents see themselves a part of something larger than themselves. You shouldn't be talking at them. The dialogue should be two-way. You're listening to them, you're educating to them, and in reverse both. When they see themselves a part of something larger, and you do have that sort of connectivity with the administration and certainly with the staff, there is a lot that the school can do, and they become really great schools and great communities. And that's what we would all want for our kids. Hold general meetings. At my elementary school, we divided them. We had one meeting in the month that was for business, short, and we had another one that was general, and we would always bring in speakers on issues that were relevant to the parents. Welcome tables, coffee tables, welcome to kindergarten. Every elementary school in the province does some form of welcome to kindergarten in the spring. Barring COVID, it's usually in person. You could speak, you can distribute something. They always send the kids home with bags of things. Sports day, most elementary schools do a sports day, and fingers crossed when assemblies are back on, before and after school, before and after the assemblies. I'm sure if you've got that great relationship with your administrative team and your staff, getting 10 minutes to get up in front of your parents, probably pretty easy to achieve. Engaged parents make a difference, not just because you have this great, strong community that you have in your school and you're all engaged and have that shared vision of what's important for your kids, but more engaged parents means you can fill more PAC executive positions. And that helps with succession planning. There are scary and sad stories where, 5 or 6 people are on a PAC executive and they all exit the building at the same time. For whatever the reasons, those are not important. But succession planning is really important. You can get your volunteers. You can reach into your parent community. It's a win-win-win for everybody. So think of it that way. Change is possible, but yes, change always takes time. We've talked about relationships and networking, small baby steps. Don't ask them to take on some massive project. Ask them to do something small. And what about creating projects and tasks for the parents that, given how their day rolls, they're not able to come between 7 and 4. They can do something at night at home. Well, there might be something that you could give them to do. That way they can participate, but participate in a way that makes sense. Nurture your interested parents, nurture your engaged parents, document and plan, and always say please and thank you. I don't know about you, but I really like it when somebody just takes a minute to thank me in whatever way that might be. Maybe it's a little handwritten note card because, well, in our electronic age, we don't do that as much anymore. Or maybe you're in the hallway and you just tap them on the shoulder. Yeah, I know, pre or post pandemic on that one. But you get the point. It's these little things that make people feel like they're a part of something and that they're helping make that change. Go down to go up. So if I am speaking and you are out there and you are been on a PAC, you will know that it's not always easy. And often we overperform and everyone around us underperforms. Human nature is pretty consistent, but you need to tell parents when you're not able to hold it up anymore. And I will tell you my quick story about my friend Heather. She was on a PAC, inner city school in Vancouver, District 39, which is where my children go to school. And inner city school means parent engagement. There is so much going on for those families, being active, present on a PAC or fundraising. It's way down the list. So their PAC was 3. She's one of the 3. They did a hot lunch thing. It was the only thing that they did. She's tapping out. She's in tears. No volunteer should be in tears. She didn't want to drop it because she was afraid if she dropped it, no one would pick it up. And I said, yes, but until you drop it, no one will pick it up. So it's a good news story. She did drop it. She didn't cry anymore. And guess what? It only took a few weeks before people went, whoa, oh, she isn't still doing it. Oh, darn, somebody has to do it. And they got engaged, right? It's totally scary, totally uncomfortable. It's not what we normally do. But sometimes you do have to have that brutal conversation with your community that says, these 2 or 3, 5 people can't keep holding it up for all of you. If it's important to you, then step forward. If it's not important to you, well, there are things that you lose by not having a PAC. So be ready to say no. And fall is scary, but do consider it if you end up in one of those situations where, you know what, it might be your path forward. Succession planning we've talked about. It doesn't mean that 3 weeks before your AGM, you go, oh yeah, we have to fill those seats and oh yeah, succession planning. No, you start at the beginning of your year or depending when your AGM falls immediately after that last AGM. Everybody should think about filling their seat. And by that, I mean, no, you don't go get your friends to take your spot, but you think of those because now you know them because you've been doing the nurturing and you've been doing the networking. Think of those that are engaged and interested and who can you pull forward? Just ask them. You got a 50-50 chance on a good day. They might turn you down or they'll turn you down this year, but you might see them next year. Now, all that to say, in a COVID environment, please know that volunteering generally across any volunteering in any NPO, in any sector, not just K-12, is extremely difficult. People are extremely tired. They're tired of all things pandemic, whatever that might be for them, and they don't have a lot to give. So if you are still giving it, everyone at your school, and I thank you, but please know it's not just K-12, it's difficult generally for all volunteering, but it too will pass and it too will change. So you can be ready on what are your next steps as you go forward. You might have heard PIPA, the Personal Information Protection Act. The reason I mention this is personal information is really important. Remember we talked about the emails? Yes, you can't just willy-nilly share them around. There is legislation that says you shouldn't do that, and you all know you wouldn't want somebody to do that with your data. So as a PAC, you are collecting personal information. Don't collect more than you need. Don't ask for things you're never going to use. Probably email or phone might be the extent of it. I'm thinking you don't need to know their address or anything else. You just need a way to communicate to them. It's common sense. Collect what you need. Make sure you're keeping it safe. Make sure that if you are having photographs or videotapes, it does apply to that as well. This is in the deck. I'm going to skip over. PACs, DPACs, and BCC PAC fall under PIPA. You can look it up. They're very clear about it. You're not going to see PAC or DPAC in that list, but suffice to say that that is where that you fall. Best practices: communicate, communicate, communicate. Divide up the work. No, the same 2 people can't do it all. Learn to say no. Make plans. It's document. It's so simple. Please write things down and write them electronically. Think about it. If I'm running the Scholastic Book Fair this year and that is my project and I'm not doing it next year, if I want somebody to take it over, really great. They can start with a page on what did I do and when did I do it and how did I do it. Then they can either do the same or improve it and make it better. But it's a place to start. And say thank you. and do ask for help. A lot of people are not good at asking for help, and they think people will donate or offer their help. Usually it's the reverse. You do have to ask. All right, I'm cruising towards the end. I'm going to end by giving you a little bit of information about BCCPAC, just in case you didn't know, because I never like to assume. We're a nonprofit charity. We too have a volunteer board, and we've been around, this is our 100th year. We represent at the provincial table the parents and guardians of children attending provincial public schools. And I'll just go back to the word volunteer. So yes, like PAC, like DPAC, BCCPAC, the executive or the board, as we call it, we're all the same. We do not receive any remuneration. We do not receive any money. In BCCPAC's case, we have a staff of 2, and certainly, yes, they are paid, but someone like myself is no different to a PAC chair. We are recognized by the government and our stakeholders as the provincial voice. And I touched on this before, and I'll say it again, no other group at our table is representing parents. And by that I mean it's our primary mandate as parents. When you are representing any of the other groups, and my partner groups know that I do say this, their primary mandates per their own bylaws and their legislation is to represent their workers. And it's not that we don't all at the table care about students and families, we do. But when there's a discussion happening, their primary focus, their primary lens is their members, the same way ours is our members, and that is parents. Here's just some examples of people at our table. I refer to it as alphabet soup. You'll see all the acronyms on the right-hand side. I don't know if all sectors are like this, but K-12 is definitely big on acronyms. So we've got trustees, superintendents, school business officials means secretary treasurers, in case you didn't know, principals, teachers, QP members, Métis Nation, FNESC, provincial government, and because of COVID, certainly it's the PHO and the BC CDC also at the table in addition to other ministries. So a little bit different than a district table, but in many ways the same. At the district, you'd have your MHOs instead of your PHOs and so forth. What we do and why it's important. We advocate for systemic changes, but we also help individual parents advocate for themselves. We do events like this to make sure people know what they may not know, or to better understand why it is, in this case, why parent engagement, why PACs and the structure of PACs is so critical and important to K-12. We represent parents on numerous committees. Oh, look, I've got one that's twice. And we use the School Act, district policies and district bylaws to help guide in advocating for their child's education program. All that to say is, if you need help, we are here to help, in addition to your PAC, in addition to your DPAC, if you are a family needing help. And systemic changes, because we're at the provincial level, we're focused on those bigger things that are throughout the system, not just specific to a school or a district. Pre-pandemic, when there was many more things going on because we weren't all COVID all the time, touching some wood, hoping that's cruising on its way out anytime soon. These are some of the places that we did represent parents. You will see there the third bullet, the Framework for Enhanced Student Learning. That's the committee that still exists pre the ministerial order and post. Mental health, numeracy, assessments, early learning, and so forth. And that work still continues as we're now getting more active with government groups. Everything we have, everything we do is on our website. It's not gated. You can get it. If you can't find it, call us. Maybe we just didn't put it up with the right language and it's harder to find than we thought it was, but it'll be there. We do have membership fees. You might recall earlier how I said that we weren't exactly like a PAC or a DPAC. BCCPAC is an NPO. It does have staff. It does pay GST. It has to file financial statements. So we have fees that help support both our advocacy and our direct support to members, which is different. PACs and DPACs do not have fees. We have a members only newsletter. We have an online forum. We've got a leadership manual that if you are involved in a PAC or a DPAC, it's a really good resource to you. And we have a committee that's working hard this year to update it, bring it forward. We've got lots of information online. Again, the greens are hyperlinked to educate parents on the roles of PACs and DPACs and parents themselves. We have a huge page that has everything that's been released and spoken about, or the guiding documents on our resource page for COVID. Lots of other resources. I'm not going to walk you through these, but feel free to use them, present them. They're there for you, as this one will be shortly as well. We do have a sample C&B on our website, on our Facebook and our Twitter channels. We share a lot of information, sometimes sooner there than an email to our members, because things, if you haven't already noticed, things in a pandemic environment happen quickly and quite often. So waiting for an email sometimes is not easy. And yes, because our staff, our paid staff, they do only work Monday to Friday, whereas lovely volunteers like myself, yes, sometimes we are posting on a Saturday or a Sunday. And we are at the end. How'd I do? Pretty good. I'm sorry if I spoke fast, but I had to cover a lot of ground and I wanted to make sure we did have some time for questions. And the thing that I want to remind people is, if you've put in your question and for some reason we don't get to it, what our normal process is we will get to it, we will answer it, and we will release it with the recording and the deck so that everybody has the access to the questions and the answers. Okay, Paula, what do we got?
So our first question is, they're all good questions, but first one is a good one we get at the office frequently. Do independent schools have PACs? If so, does BCC PAC represent those PACs too?
It's a yes, no. So it's been a while since I read the Independent School Act. So just for clarity, public schools fall under the BC School Act. Independent schools, so by that I mean private, independent, faith-based, whatever you want to call them, they're independent. They fall under the Independent School Act. And while there are sections that are quite similar, there are whole sections that are quite dissimilar. The answer is, can they come together as a group of parents? Yes. Do they then fall under BCC PAC? Unfortunately, no. Our bylaws and our mandate are very clear that it has to do with public school. And so by default, an independent, or by definition, an independent school is not a public school. But can you bring yourselves together and form a PAC-like structure? Yes, you can.
There was a slide early in the presentation that mentioned the purpose, understanding the purpose of a PAC, and they're wondering how much leeway does an individual PAC have in defining its own purpose when revising its constitution and bylaws?
Oh, these are good questions. Oh, all right then. Well, there is a little bit in the School Act, but it really is quite little. But it's back to, I hesitate to flip, but I might. There are certain things that a PAC is able to do. If you recall, the sort of advise having to do with education and so forth. So as long as it wasn't counter to what a PAC would do, it would, I can't really say yes or no without knowing what it is, but it would be needed to be in your bylaws, but be careful of what is the purpose of a PAC. It is a parent advisory council in that sense per the School Act. But if you want some help with that, certainly you can find us offline through email. So I didn't answer that perhaps as well as you might have hoped, but without knowing what it is you're referencing, I hesitate to give more clarity there.
Question, if we can't find a copy of our constitution and bylaws, is there somewhere they are filed or saved?
If only. Make sure you've looked everywhere. So personal example, at my elementary school, we were looking to revise them. yes, no one could find them. I found a paper copy in a filing cabinet, in a storage, in the garage. And then of course we typed it in and moved forward from there. So scour everywhere, check with your admin, check with the office staff. Sometimes those lovely ladies in the front office have been there a really long time and they know things. They know lots of things, so nurture them and find out. You could check with your DPAC, maybe at some point. At some time somebody gave them a copy, maybe they gave it to the district. Do all of that, and if it nets zero, then start fresh, find someone else's. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's lots of them to be found online from your sister packs, peer packs, and just go forward from there, because not having one is worse than starting at zero and creating it fresh.
One of your slides commented that a budget must be presented and approved at the AGM. What if the AGM is held in the spring and the fiscal year ends in July? We don't usually approve the budget until October.
I don't know if my treasurer's on the line. Paula, I'll answer, but this is a little bit your area of expertise also. I would suggest that maybe you need a better alignment on fiscal year meets AGM meets budget. That would be my suggestion. Now, that's not easy. It requires a change to your bylaws. Paula?
Yeah, I'm with you. The simple answer is your bylaws are your rules. So if your bylaws say that your AGM is held in the spring, then that is when you would want to pass the budget. And as a treasurer for many years, I have always encouraged and changed the formula on the PACs I've been on to approve that budget in the spring, so that when you walk in the door September 1st, you have a budget in place and approval to spend money. Because if you wait till October, you technically can't be doing a single thing until that budget is approved. So it makes far more sense for the, generally what I say is if you can have your elections in May and do your budget in June, that makes sense, because you've then got a month of overlap between your outgoing and incoming executive to form that budget together with, here's what we've done in the past and why, and here's what we want to do going forward, and marry the two together into the budget in June so that September you're operating.
These are great questions.
Yeah. Question regarding PAC parent emails. Is it permitted to have the school administration send emails on behalf of the PAC? It seemed silly to me to maintain two email systems.
Yes, absolutely, you can do that. And yes, it might seem silly, but and I don't want this to be heard as a negative, not all schools sort of run or operate the same way. It could be everything to the kind of people that are in the building, through to how big the school is, how much staff they have, how much other projects they have. So most schools will very generously offer to either add you to theirs or send out on your behalf, as you've noted in your question. There are schools where sometimes that's not easy for them to do. But yes, if you can do it, by all means, as long as they're able to communicate when and the content that you need to communicate as often as you need to do it. Otherwise, then yes, maintaining your own list, while it has its cons, it does have its pros.
Our school is conducting all fundraising activities. Is the school required by legislation or regulation to be transparent about funds that are raised and where they are spent?
Per your bylaws, yes, you must have some transparency on your finances and be financially accountable. So it would depend how it's worded in your own individual bylaws, but certainly it's good fiscal prudence, and it creates trust and that connectivity that I've talked about, community, if you can be very clear about what you're doing. And then, of course, what money comes in and what money is going out. Remember, too, that on the gaming side, where gaming does grant those funds to you, and there are rules and guidelines to follow in the spending of it, both the application and then the reporting 90 days after your fiscal year. Everybody catch that? If not, there's a resource page on the website that covers that. All that to say is they actually do want that done, and they can come back and ask you. So you're not a business, so nobody's CRA is not going to audit you, but there is an ability for somebody at gaming to check back with you and say, oh, hey, can you explain this? Or, hey, you didn't file your reporting. So take that same kind of rigor, your financial prudence, and do it with your general funds. I know if I was giving you money, I would like to know where it went. You don't have to give them line by line, GL by GL, as we would call it in our office, but you should tell them generally where it went. So, X amount went to field trips, Y amount went to, I don't know, carnival or school dance, or however you can bucket them. You don't have to give them each line. More?
Some comments saying this was great, but it was so nice to be in person back in 2019.
I'm with you. It really was.
Some questions about accessing a copy of the presentation.
Yep. It's right there. See the bit.ly? If I can highlight it. Whoa. Whoa. Sorry about that.
And of course, we'll, after it's been trimmed and all, a copy of the presentation will also be posted to the website if anyone wants to see the recording again.
Yep.
Someone who came in a bit late but would like to know how the Constitution and Bylaws is created.
Similar to the question a few questions ago, you should hopefully be able to find the current one from whatever date it was last created. It's your current one. If you can't, and you've looked everywhere far and wide, as many places as possible, and you net nothing, then find one online that you think is closest to how you operate. Start as that as your base and work forward and change it to represent how your PAC runs, because they don't all run identically. What I should have said was, yes, get a committee. This is where your parent community, it doesn't have to be a committee of your executive, have one person lead it, and go and find some people that are, kind of like yours truly. I'm kind of nerdy. I like the discussion about Constitution and bylaws. I'm wagering that you've probably got those people in your community as well. See if they're interested. Just ask them, and then have that committee review the bylaws, make a recommendation to your executive, who then, you have a bit of a back and forth, whatever that might be, and then you present it to your members in advance of your AGM, and hopefully they have some good time, some good input and time to give you input, and then you vote on it.
Does the DPAC have the right to be on all Board of Trustees committees, for example, a transportation committee?
To the best of my understanding, and if you want to talk with me offline, because I don't want to ask you what your district is, but yes, the DPAC is the official stakeholder at the district table, so they should be able to be represented in any standing ad hoc committees, the same as the other stakeholders. Now, they may choose not to for whatever reason, but yes, they should have that right.
Do you have a template survey we could send to parents to collect information on what's important to them, which would help inform the tactics that are within our annual plan?
Sadly, no, but that's a really good idea. If you're asking as a PAC, maybe your DPAC has done one recently. You can. There are some free survey tools online. They max out on the number of people that you ask. You can also do Google Forms and collect survey data that dumps into Excel. And at that point, your eyes are glazing over and going, that's way too technical, Andrea. If you need some help in the tools, certainly the office or myself can help you. As far as a template, no, sorry.
This parent is from Macau and is a parent of an international student. can they be part of the PAC and join the membership? And are the PAC laws and ACT applying to international parents?
The PAC is made up of parents, guardians, or caregivers who are responsible for the child or children that are enrolled in that school. So there is no delineation made between a resident or an international student. As long as you have a child enrolled in that school, you are part of that PAC. And yes, you'd want to be communicating with the PAC executive and the larger PAC.
Do you have a sample multi-year strategic plan and annual operating plan?
Wow. Okay, these people are real. Oh, that is an excellent question. And sadly, my answer is no, I do not. But I'm making a note of that because that's really smart. I don't know who these people are, but I may be reaching out to you afterwards.
Well, I know who they are and I know how to get in touch with them. So yeah. Sounds like
these
a volunteer.
Yeah,
voluntold.
These are excellent questions. You can help us with that.
Confirming that if a PAC's bylaws stipulates a maximum length of a term, can a position be extended by a motion and vote at a meeting?
Only if it allows that in your bylaws. So what I mean is, yes, fixed terms are good. I know on the one hand, you're going, yeah, but this person over here is so great. And if they did another term, and that's true, but sometimes it's the other side of, oh my gosh, that person really needs to go. And I've heard stories of both multiple times. So terms are useful. Your bylaws, remember how I said they should account for vacancies? They should account for that sort of discrepancy of if you wanted to, could you? So if it's not in your bylaws, it would depend how your exec and your parent community feels about it. You could potentially ask, as long as it's not prohibited in your bylaws, it's by definition not allowed either. Change your bylaws, have them take on a different role. So if they're, secretary, maybe they're a member at large or vice versa, because usually the terms are attached to the role, the title, not just being on the executive, if that makes sense.
Here's an easy one. Do you have
goody.
a sample of Constitution, bylaws, and policy manual?
Not policy manual, but I'm glad that you asked it because it says that you heard me and you're thinking about it. Yes, you should have one. And don't think of it as something really difficult. Just think of writing down everything that you do and write it down in a Word doc or Excel, it doesn't matter, and stuff it on a shared drive. The sample C&B is most definitely on the website.
Section 6 of the leadership manual. If you are required to represent your parents, how do you advocate in situations where parents are divided on the issues? Present both options to the school and let them decide?
Oh, it's a tough one. Surveying them to get a good sense of it. Is it affecting the educational programming of the students, of your children? Is it important to, you as a parent, guardian community within your school? There's more questions than answers on that one. And then there's some things, and I'm not saying that you are asking this, but during the pandemic, of course, one of the things that has risen in all levels in K-12 is everything from, vaccine, no vaccine, mask, no mask. What I can tell you is for every one person that is pro-mask, I can find you one that's anti-mask. And I'm not joking, and I'm not saying that to make light of it. It's never assumed that everybody is this way or that way, which is why your question is great. So be mindful of the things that you take on. Is it something you should be giving input on? Talk to your administrators, see if they have a better sense of things. It's communication is key there.
Okay. Some PACs, C&B, allow for school district employees to serve in a PAC executive role, and some do not. Is there a best practice opinion on having or not having district employees in executive roles?
The best practice is to what's the phrase? Chris wouldn't say this in these ways, but he would agree with me. And we've commented it, he and I both online on some of the Facebook groups, is every parent in the school who has a child in the school is by default a member of the PAC. So I understand why there are bylaws that either allow or don't allow. It's the same as what I just talked about. It's the terms. Sometimes you have good people and you want to keep them a long time. Other times you have not so good people and you can't wait for their terms to be done. Excuse me. So the same kind of applies. There might be situations where if they are a staff person and they have a child in the school, that something comes of that, and it's difficult to deal with. But by and large, it probably isn't going to come to pass. So think about what is the best path forward to make sure that all of your parent community is represented, and consider either taking the clause out or putting the right clause in your bylaws.
Do you have a sample organization structure with roles and responsibilities of various PAC members? Right now, we just have executive members and are looking to create committees as a way to engage more parents, distribute work more evenly, and create a succession plan.
Okay, these people are awesome. Make a note of that one too.
Same person.
Okay. Okay, we want to talk to you. So I don't have anything that represents an org chart, but definitely you don't necessarily have to have them in your bylaws, although there's benefit to doing so. Yes, just map out what it is you want them to do. Think of it like if you were posting a job description, what are the things you need them to do? What are the skills you're kind of looking for? It's back to the documentation. As much as you can get down and document is really, really important. And so that they have a role. I've seen it done where the person, I'll use Scholastic. We used to do Scholastic book fairs at my elementary school. We would have a parent who would lead that project. They weren't on the PAC executive, but they were a parent who agreed to do it. And then of course, then there were all the volunteers that fell out of that. So they're working in connection with the PAC because they're a subcommittee of it. Grad committees are the same, grade 7 grads, grade 12s, whatever it is. So do it that way. But yeah, the more you can write down and sort of articulate what it is not, what it's about, what's the time commitment, how many hours a week, what are you really asking of me? It makes it much easier to pitch. It makes it much easier as a parent volunteer to consider it. So I would go that route, but in answer to your question, no, I don't have an org chart thing.
Clarification on an earlier question, that question about the fundraising for the school. She wasn't asking about the PAC being transparent. She was asking about the school because the school administration, she says, I'm wondering about funds raised by school administration. So I think the school actually does the fundraising.
Yeah, there are cases where I know there's more than this, but I'll use Hot Lunch. Sometimes Hot Lunch is actually run by the school. And yes, the funds are raised in that sense. Not all districts, not all schools are keen to share their budget with PAC or PAC executive. Surrey recently did that, and I want to say 2022 recently. If you have a look online, you'll see it. They actually shared their school budgets publicly, specifically with the PACs and the DPAC, which is a great move. Be prepared for not all people are comfortable with it, but do ask. I don't know that there's any regulation, although I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. I don't know that there's any regulation that says they have to share it with you at the school level.
On your slide regarding elections, it notes we should record election results, including a motion. Could you expand on the particular motion we should be doing?
So let's say, for example, again, I'll use my own elementary school or my high school. It runs a little loose. So it's not like the BCC PAC AGM, which is very formal. It's a little loose. So you're a bunch of people in a room and you've got, positions up on some kind of chalkboard or a whiteboard. And all of a sudden, you've got 5 members at large, 1 for treasurer. You've got 1 for every role and a multiple members at large. If you're voting by show of hands and it's in that thing, then it's easy to just have a motion to accept them as a slate. So I motion to accept and then basically list them all out. And then somebody seconds it and then everybody votes and off you go. So you accept them as a slate. In other cases, depending on how you're doing it, if you're doing secret ballots or if you're doing like ballots or you've got multiple people running, no, you wouldn't do a motion, but sometimes more often than not, there isn't usually multiple people running for those positions. So a motion and then everybody listed. It then makes it very formal and it goes in your AGM minutes and everybody has had, who was in the room can participate and vote.
Has BCC PAC ever considered creating and offering a website to create constitutions? For example, with click boxes and toggles, a PAC would go through and select everything that applies to them. They hit create and the Constitution is created with all those fancy Constitution words. Then we truly aren't all trying to be mini lawyers and Robert's Rules 101 keeners.
No, interesting idea. We do have a staff of 2, which everything that we do, their days are full. It's an interesting idea. My suggestion in the interim, in the absence of such a thing, because it doesn't currently exist today, is that's what I was meaning about. Don't invent the wheel. Go and find another PAC or DPAC's bylaws or the sample we have online. And you don't need to reinvent it. You just need to tweak it slightly. So a good example is when the Societies Act was changed in 2016 and then 2018, most NPOs like ourselves, although let me preface that by saying BCC PAC's bylaws are not like anyone else's bylaws. They all follow a very similar format. Like people have just cut and paste from the Societies Act and repurposed whole sections. So no, you don't need to understand Robert's rules to do that. You just need to understand what it says. And most C&Bs are written in a really simple language. I do hear you though on the, one for all. But in the absence of that today, that would be the route I would suggest.
And someone has kindly pointed out that our sample Constitution and Bylaws in our leadership manual is from 2004.
Yes, the whole manual is, which is why our team is updating it now. So we'll take a look at that. I'm happy to share the one from my elementary school. I have shared it before. If you send me an email, I'll send it to you. I'm no longer at the elementary school, but it's only a few years old.
And this, on our social media sites, can we post information about or provide links to public sites that do provide information about issues such as COVID-19, vaccinations, family support organizations, etc.? Or is this considered political in nature?
Twofold answer. PACs, DPACs are autonomous insofar as they function under their bylaws and they are responsible to their members, their school communities, their other PACs. So it's a decision you have to make as an executive. As an example, we as BCC PAC have made that decision, 2 decisions we made. One, we do follow the advice of the PHO and the BCCDC. But yes, if you look at our social media channels, yeah, we will provide information that's for families, Kelty Mental Health, Family Support Institute, Obesity Foundation, like anything that is relevant to families in all that they do. So yes, it may not be 100% K-12 in nature, but it's helpful to families. So you just have to make that decision.
If we have a change of executives mid-year and those executives were signers on the bank accounts, should we be having it motioned in the minutes to have them both removed and the new signers put on?
Yes.
I would think it would be prudent, and I believe that I heard in PAC 101 from DPAC that we are supposed to do so. Should
Yes.
that also be the policy when we are electing new executives?
Twofold. So yes, you should do that. And there's two really good reasons why you do it. A, you have a record of it, which is what your minutes are, is a record of business decisions, of actions and things. Call them motions, call them, it doesn't matter. You're making a record of it. So yes, very good to notice the outgoing and the incoming, two different motions or same motion, but it'd be really long. Second reason is many banks and even credit unions will want to see those minutes to show that it in fact was Andrea was off and Paula was on, or whatever that might be. So really two good reasons to do that. And now I've forgotten the second question.
Should that also be the policy when we are electing new executives? Sort of the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
When I reread the question with my eyes as opposed to out loud, I do see it slightly differently. They were saying if the change of executives, if the same person is coming into a different position, in that case, you don't need a motion to remove them and have them put back on again. If they've already been named as a signing authority, they just stay on it, and there's nothing in the minutes to change that. You only need a motion for anybody who's being removed as a signing authority and anybody who's being added as a signing authority for the bank's purposes.
Yes, correct.
We had a parent participate in a fundraising adventure that was not principal approved. There was an amount over $2,000 tagged for a specific fundraiser. Our principal consulted with the district, and the check was put into a fund that we, the PAC, do not have access to, but it sounds like the funds belong to us. How do we account for these funds and ensure our PAC has a say in how the funds are spent?
There's more to that one than I can answer. Happy to answer, but prefer you email me so I can get at the nuances that I can kind of hear. The lesson there is anything that happens in the school should definitely be connected to the PAC. Subcommittee working with, however you want to phrase it, because there are issues like this one. And definitely there should have been a conversation on any event or fundraising or initiative that you're doing at the school that obviously involves the administration and the staff, because you are trying to work together and be cohesive. So, but again, there's more questions I would like to ask in response to your question, but happy to do that offline.
Will there be any webinars on Robert's rules?
No, because as much as I know what I know, I am certainly not a proficient expert on it. We are looking at a Treasurer 101 or Treasurer, end to end that our Treasurer Michelle is looking to lead. We're just looking at dates, either before March break or certainly after, but before April when everything gets really busy with the conference and the AGM.
If someone was voted to take on 2 executive roles and another parent would like to step up and take on one of the roles, is that to be allowed, or does the person doing both roles get to continue for the remainder of the year?
Okay, so twofold answer. Always back to your bylaws. So you remember how I said the bylaws are really, really important. They're your operating rules and you do have to follow them. So the problem is if they're not really clear, not concise, and not fulsome, it becomes a problem to operate, so to speak. So I would suggest that no person should have 2 roles. I get that maybe you didn't have enough people, then leave one empty. You just really don't want one person having 2 roles. Now, having said that you have somebody that has 2 roles and somebody's willing to take it on, again, back to the language of your bylaws. If you're only electing people for positions at your AGM and the bylaws don't allow for absences, vacancies, or the description you just gave, again, as much as it's not prohibited, it's also not actually allowed. Again, could be a vote in your executive. You really should communicate with your community, because unlike at an AGM where the people who show have the ability to vote that person into that role, by you doing it at the executive, you've removed that option from your parent community, which you wouldn't want to do.
Meeting question. When the agenda says approve agenda and approve previous minutes, does the chair need a first and a seconder and an all in favor to approve them? Or if one person raises a hand, is that okay?
You should have a mover and a seconder.
This is a PAC executive question. We have parents who want to voice their opinions regarding PHOs and school district mandates. They feel PAC should be allowing space for these types of discussions in order to create change. How would you manage this?
Carefully. Yeah, it's out there. We know that. It's one of those things when you go back to what is the purpose of a PAC, you could go either way on, yes, it's your job to educate and inform. Unfortunately or fortunately, the pandemic has created polarization among us as people. We're either over here or we're over here, not necessarily always on the same page together. Certainly, our stand is we defer to the PHO. I'm in no position to say I know what she knows. I'm definitely not a medical officer. I can read sun up to sundown on the internet. That does not make me a medical professional. So we just defer to her. So when we're sharing information, it's just facts. Are there people out there that are counter to the CDC and the PHO? Yes. It's tricky for a PAC. If you can, step away from it and don't allow either side. It's really not in your core purposes. It's not necessarily affecting the education of the children in the school, but it is very delicate and emotions run high.
Have you heard of POSIP, the parent engagement software?
No. What does it do?
Doesn't say.
Okay, we'll go look that up. Never heard of it.
That's it for questions. Just a lot of very nice thank yous, Andrea, for all the information. Very much appreciated. People are looking forward to re-seeing it. There's so much to take in.
Yeah, like I said, there's 70 slides. There's a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure that I did cover it from end to end, and there is a lot. And as you know, if you're on a PAC or DPAC, there's even more than this. It comes with time. There's the nuances. You heard them in the questions yourself. Please know, we are here to help. We do like it when you call if you are a member, but no, we will not turn you away, which I realize is self-defeating. Feel free to laugh at that moment. But we are trying to help people. So if you do have those kinds of questions, as you heard Paula, Heather's quietly in the back of the scenes as well. They are there and they can answer it. Email is a little easier sometimes because you've got time to sort of articulate. But yes, we can help. Your DPAC, if you're a PAC, your DPAC team of people is hugely knowledgeable. Don't underestimate that they are there for you and can be of great assistance to you in some of the stuff that was raised today, or many things that are just happening in your district. So do reach out to them. They're a wealth of information as well. Yeah, thank you for joining us this evening. That's the short link. Feel free to share with it, share it with your communities, use the part that makes sense to you. We're going to have a look at all the questions, and there were some really interesting ideas. And so thank you for staying with us, and thank you for raising them, and enjoy the rest of your evening.